So I need to go back.
Very nice. Okay. Well, we'll get
Have you-
started. And
Have you done it at all, anybody?
Probably
Terry?
first Weavers.
My
So
brother did it.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was starting it just as I was leaving.
He did a deep dive. So he's probably in our peer group network. He's probably the most advanced. And he has we did a podcast about it. So if you go on and find the podcast with Tony Peterson.
Yeah, I thought I listened to that, but I probably just didn't pay close attention.
Well, I find with the podcasts, I mean, not to knock myself, but I can't stay focused on them. Like maybe if it was like a video or something.
That has nothing to do with podcast, Crowley.
Oh, it's me. I'm the one.
Yeah, it's that ADHD that you got
Sorry
going
to
on there,
break it to
friend.
you.
I can't even listen
stop.
to my own podcasts.
Oh,
Excellent.
very good. Very good. Yeah, Beth, I've not had any experience with this. That's why I'm interested.
Great.
Nice to
And,
hear your voice, Terry. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Good to hear yours also.
The voice from beyond.
There
Okay.
you go.
And
Well,
hi,
we
Miss
have-
Rachel.
We have
Hello.
Rachel here. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Good, hello.
Well, we're going to get started here. So quick survey around the room. How many people have not made it through the book yet?
Well, I got to page chapter 4, so I'm not through the book. But
I've
3.5.
So to be totally honest, I've read the book twice. And until I actually created a PowerPoint, I really didn't get it until just now. No, but I will say that I totally get the concept of profit first. However, implementing it was a whole nother, situation, right? So we've had people who've read the book all throughout our peer group network, and it's been kicking around forever. And so because the second quarter in peer groups is all about cash and cash management, what better book to use for our book club choice than Profit First? So that's what brings us here today. Appreciate everybody being here. We do have 15 registered, so there'll be a number of people joining us as we get to a second and third hour over the course of the second quarter. Today we have an hour, so we'll try to cut you guys off right around or right after 3 o'clock, because I know some of you are going to run during this call as well. So Profit First, obviously Michael Michalowicz wrote it. I think that's how he says his last name. And he's got a number of great books out there. And this book, like I said earlier, just keeps coming back at me, probably because of the way I run peer groups currently. So we'll get started. So the first thing that I took away and I wanted to ask you guys about was, let me see if I can get this going here. All right, Charlie, I need your technology help. I have it on a second screen.
Oh, you got to share just your one screen. Don't share both of them.
Yeah, but I'm trying to forward it. Let me try something here. I'm gonna
Just drag it from your second screen to your first screen.
Yeah, the problem is it's in. I know, that's what I'll do. You're right. It didn't like it in that modes here. So let me just change. Share screen. I think if I do this approach. No. All right, well, you can see it now, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to see if we can get, now you're seeing it with the notes, correct? But you're not seeing the slideshow. All right. So
Right.
one thing.
If you present it from there, you should be good.
Okay, you can see that, right?
There, now you got it and it's presenting. That's good.
Oh, it's still not presenting, but I apologize. I should know how to do this by now.
You're presenting to us. It shows on our screen.
Yeah, but it's not showing the next. I can't forward. I'm not able to forward it. So let me just. fix something here. I think if I take share screen and then do presentation. I don't want to watch this part though. I want to see the actual, oh, if I just disconnect that screen, maybe. Sorry about that. There we go. Took my logic a little time to get going there, but so you might have to minimize our our views of each other if that gets in your way. So just be aware of that. I don't want you to see. Can you see my you can see my PowerPoint, but can you also see my thumbnails?
No, all we see is the PowerPoint with Frankenstein on it.
Okay, good. So you don't see yourself right now. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So chapter 1, obviously he has to kick it off, and that's when he drops it on us that your business is out of control, cash-eating monster, right? So do you guys remember the story about Frankenstein? I see some head nods going side to side. Okay.
I don't know what you want me to remember about the movie, and I'm trying to make it.
Well, no. So what he did in the book was he addressed this kind of in a way that was helpful to me. He said, Dr. Frankenstein was so excited when he starts making Frankenstein, like, oh my gosh, we're going to create this superhuman. It's going to be great. And so he's very positive, throwing all his energies into it, right? And then slowly but surely it becomes a monster, right? It's not Frankenstein the superhuman, it's Frankenstein the monster. And so tremendous havoc ensues, and Dr. Frankenstein is massively stressed out for the rest of the movie, right? So he kind of said, hey, that's kind of like your business when you start it, right? Or take over, right, Michelle? So that I thought was real powerful analogy for me. I think, like, in what ways do you guys see your business as it's grown, where all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't know that, I should probably get on top of that? Does anybody have any good examples of struggles they've had?
I actually didn't like that. Was one paragraph in the very beginning of the chapter. What hit me more about the cash eating monster portion is how much of my business is eating away at my family's income, right? What I can take home to put food on the table and keep a roof over our heads. To me, that was the biggest thing, because the way that it had always been done in my dad's generation was so different that he never understood that component. It was always just, you work hard and then you pay your bills and then you take what's left. And that's just always been sort of the way that things have been done and how I learned how business works. And that's exactly what Mike talks about is the wrong way to do it, because that's what he went through. And to me, that's what hit home more for me. And that's how I feel it's a cash eating monster, is that it's eating like my cash. And for me, the business is more than just a business, right? It's more of the legacy, and it's more of taking care of the employees. And then how do I, look at it as something that could actually be very profitable for myself personally. So.
Exactly. I mean, it's the first step in the book that kind of gets you to understand how much we get out of control with our businesses. We might have some success on the sales side and we're growing the business, or we're organizational success. We've got some people who really believe in us and the employees are on board. But wait a second, they cost a little bit more, and we're trying to retain them and they cost a little bit more, and all those things start happening. And then, also if you ever had a small business and you grew it into a big business, and Beth went through this, when Beth was working on the counter, not to speak for you, but, when she had to worry about the counter and had to worry about, some basic bookkeeping, it was pretty, she could stay on top of it. But, as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, time flies. And so same thing happened to me in peer groups, where all of a sudden, I'm not looking at things monthly. I'm not looking at, what's going on with cash flow in my company. And so that was really the wake up call. In his case, on the next chapter, or inside this first chapter, he brings up these concepts of, he had Valentine's Day, and it was really D-Day for him. Valentine's Day was this horrible moment in the author's world where, you get a phone call and you've got a bill due that you can't do, or he just had a successful moment and he got this great commission, and then all of a sudden he realized that he had to pay more taxes or something like that, right? So that's kind of the concept of where, when you should be celebrating, when you should be part of your family's life, you're like having this horrible stuff happen on the side related to your business. And then he, of course, translates that into, we're going broke. He starts sharing with his family. His little daughter goes upstairs and gets her piggy bank and brings it down and says, here, Daddy, I want to share, my piggy bank with you. So I think that's, it's a great way to kick off the conversation to say, yeah, I don't think that's really cool. It doesn't really feel good, right? So, so the first question is, has anybody had a moment like that related to a Valentine's Day? I can chime in if you need one.
I think that for me, what, sort of like what you were saying there, and a little bit more like with what Michelle was saying too, is, you're so busy working every day, that the guys are calling, they need these parts, we need to update this equipment and that equipment and everything. And so you're just handling, you're in such I was like the hamster on the little wheel, and you're just running around, and all of a sudden, like when I first met Ami, when we were all at Talking Stick that first time, was just like, holy hat, man, my cash flow is a mess. And after coming out of the recession, and I was growing, 15, 20% a year, but I had like no cash. And I still wasn't getting my credit lines paid off that I had needed to, even though in my strong time of the year, I got was paying all the bills easily, but I wasn't paying off the former stuff. And I just got myself into a spin, and it was driving me nuts. And yet when you're growing and you need more cash to run everything. Yeah. Then all of a sudden the concept of taking more out for me was one thing, but it was just even getting myself back out of the recession credit line, had a home equity line, different things. I just got touched. That was awful.
That's nuts. I remember in peer groups, we had a number of people who hit the pause button on their compensation on a regular basis. And this was before the pandemic, right? It was, I needed to get these extra employees in under the roof. And so I did it, but now my own salary has become temperamental, right? So that's a great example of something like that, where you're kind of missing the point of your business, right? What you're supposed to do. So big 3 points that come out of this first chapter: money problems, bigger is not better, and check to check and panic to panic. So a couple things on this. Number one, money problems. So he brings in this concept of, if your sales slow down, you're going to have money problems. If your sales speed up, you could have money problems. And that is related to cash flow, right? So we, in peer groups, we look at profit and loss for performance, and we look at balance sheet for health, but rarely do we pull up the cash flow statement. And so we had one of our premier groups, not the premier group, but one of our premier groups decided to look at cash flow statements in their meeting this spring. And it was shocking to some of them, because they know that what they show on their profit and loss statement isn't necessarily what ends up in the bank, but they didn't realize how badly or how different those numbers are, especially if you're in the rental industry, because you're just constantly refreshing your assets, right? So they do not equate. So net earnings does not equate to net profit, obviously. So I think that's something that came out of that first piece. The second one, which is bigger is not better, a good point that he makes is more sales does not equal more profit, right? So that's an interesting point. He uses some really good examples we're going to touch on, but think about that for a second. What would be an example of a growth decision for wrong reasons? So we have a tendency to chase revenue, right? So what's an example of chasing revenue for wrong reasons?
I see it on the party and event side when guys get into big giant events that they're sub-renting half the stuff and hiring temporary labor and doing it last minute and all those kinds of things that there's no money left in it by the time you're done.
Yep.
And
I
even
would also,
in the equipment side, like thinking, okay, now I want to go buy more bigger booms and things, and they kill your cash flow.
yeah, we could do a whole nother hour on utilization of classes of assets, right? How they affect your cash flow. Holy cow, what a lesson that would be. We should consider that. I would say also just being too opportunistic with selling. So we had an issue yesterday and I got caught, just panicked. So we did a group of dealers for peer group, and we had this opportunity to do an HR group, subgroup. So they brought their HR directors, and we had no intention of that being an ongoing thing. We just were doing them a favor. We're charging them a fee for it. And so the chairperson of the group, and I'm sure they're going to watch this and they'll get a laugh, but the chairperson of the group, caught me and it's like, hey, yeah, we were thinking about making this permanent, and but we need to know now if you can do it for this amount of money. And so like immediately they're like, oh, revenue, this is great. And so I kind of accepted it, and I don't think I can go back on my word, but I will say that I'm doing the math after the fact going, wow, did I just give them a really big discount on on peer group fees? But it's like, if you're not following your plan, you will do add-ons. And a great example of that comes up here. I'll just get to this. So in this case, it's saying, hey, stay focused on your job costing, your project costing, your profit center costing. Don't compromise if you have a vision for what you're trying to do, because it can lead to the survival trap. So here we go. So we're going to get into the survival trap. And if you remember this one in the book, it says, you're going to have a crisis point or just a lack of plan, and you'll start doing things like taking on an unfit project to cover some costs. So, we've expanded our overhead expenses tremendously inside of peer groups. And so now all of a sudden, like, everything looks good to me, right? So we had this opportunity to grow sales in $100 increments recently. So I took it, but I'm sitting there now thinking about it. I'm like, that's going to take us out of the pocket for like 2 days. And, what is our hourly cost to use Charlie for something or Dan for something, when we're chasing these $100 payouts, right? So that's something that happens. You can also see here that over on the left, it says offer new product to make immediate revenue. It may not be your core business, right? So if we're chasing something that's not who we are, it can pull us the wrong direction. We see that with rental companies that decide to go into either a line of business that's not them or asset class, right? So Terry's on the line here. I don't know if he's still listening, but Terry, do you remember when Rental Max got into the service business?
You're on mute, Terry. Mute?
Nope, not there.
You lost him already, Dan.
I was probably bringing up a bad memory for him.
Did they do outside service?
Well, exactly. So we do see rental companies at times say, hey, you know what?
Dan, I am here. Yeah, you know what? We tried to do some outside service and lost our shirt at it. And the customer wanted, and we were like, well, this will cement our relationship with the company and, the customer and all that good stuff. And it ended up like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we do for a living. And so we really didn't comprehend the value that we were providing and how great it was and how little we were charging. And we ended up eating it and just said, well, lesson learned, move on.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. It's not fun to to share not success story, but we appreciate your
Well, it's part of the
transcript.
College of Hard Knocks, and you know, it's
Right.
and as you work your way through this business, you know, you get the opportunity, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm sure we can make some money on it, and you know, the good news is we found out fairly soon that, like, wait a minute, we actually did look at it and said this is a losing proposition.
We did the
Great.
same. I mean, I thought, well, this would be a great winter thing, and keep my guys busy, and just the tail spinning of finding parts for stuff that Husqvarna steel, all that was easy, but it was these obscure things, the stuff people buy at Lowe's and they want us to fix, the little pressure washers.
Mm.
And we did the same thing. We just went, you know what, somebody else can do that for pennies on the dollar, because you can't repair a $99 pressure washer for any.
Exactly.
Well, it's tough. We're serial entrepreneurs. We like to say yes, so that becomes part of the challenge. This was
You're all visionaries. You need the implementer to pull you back.
That's right. That's right. Says the implementer. So I forget the name of this guy, Andy, let's call him Andy. So he brings up the story of Andy, who's the landscaper guy who, is just a great hustler, works hard, plays hard. And then Andy said, hey, I noticed around your house. Would you like me to fix that for you?
Right.
And so he did that. And
roofing,
then they did another one. Yeah, he just kept moving from project to project. And to Mike's credit, he's identifies like, this guy's not staying focused on his core strength, right? So that's, again, just opportunistically, you get into that survival trap of you got to generate the revenue to pay the bills that are out of control instead of looking at the bills, right? So let's get to that next piece here. So traditional accounting is killing your business. Everybody who knows me knows I love accrual accounting, because accrual accounting, if cash is never an issue, it tells you how you're performing at all times, and it really is about activity. However, it does not help you if you are someone who's managing a tight balance sheet. Also, the second part that we get to in this end of the first chapter is profit first is really built for humans. And so what he brings into that conversation is really about, what's our human nature. So the first one, traditional accounting is killing your business. What is it about GAAP and accrual that sucks? So Charlie, you're a detail guy. What do you think hurts our members if they focus too much on GAAP and accrual?
Well, the accrual, you're not, like you were talking about cash flow. You don't see that on the stuff that you're looking at every single day. You're not used to seeing that, unless, like he talked about in the webinar, where you're looking at your bank balance every day.
Correct.
And seeing what's coming and going out of there.
Exactly. So, that's part of what I'm starting to learn, because my problem has been traditionally this, right? So it's always small balance sheet, focused on the big game. Charlie saw my accounts receivable when he joined the company and was probably like, what are you doing? You got to collect those receivables. So again, very much, if it's not in your pocket, if you haven't collected the money, it's not there. It's not a sale, right? The hope is that you can collect, but it doesn't help you with day-to-day cash flow needs. The second piece is, how is profit first built for humans? So let's talk about human behavior. What is your behavior, whether you're a business owner or not a business owner? What's your behavior related to money? Any comments? Behavior related to money.
I think he kind of stated, if you have it, you spend it. So it's like, if your house is a certain size, you're going to fill it, even though, my husband's like, we don't have to fill it.
Yeah. So that concept's a great one that gets introduced, I think, in chapter 2, which is the Parkinsons Law, I think, which, and I think of Parkinsons Law as also, if somebody has 4 weeks to do a paper for school, they take all 4 weeks, right? Whatever you get, you take. But that's exactly right. So appreciate that, Rachel. If you have the cash, you spend it. We saw that happen in the time of COVID and the pandemic. there wasn't a lot of savings going on, I would say. I think there was a lot of spending because money was coming from different sources at the time. So it's a little different. We were really stimulating the economy by putting money into people's pockets. They weren't necessarily saying, thank you for the money, I'm going to save it. They were spending it. And that's what everybody in the government's hoping for. So the spending the money was exactly what they got, and it worked for them. So the thing that I find about Profit First being built for humans is how we view money is in front of our accounting. So accounting, it seems like it's always going to be backward, right? So, we'll always have to deal with that. Beth, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one, and certainly check the video. So this
Yeah, sorry
idea-
about that. Have a great day.
Yeah, no problem. So the cash is in front of the accounting in your business. And I think that's by him saying we can build you a system for your business that follows your natural behavior. I was probably the hardest person to sell on that. And now I'm like believing in it. So I'm really excited about where we're at now. So you can tame the monster. There's Frank. He's being tamed, as you can see. Next up, chapter 2. How are we doing on time there, Charlie? Still got some time? Yeah, halfway point. So this has the core principles. So do you guys remember this part? This is great. So the beginning of chapter 2 talks about the core principles of eating right, which is what I need to think about after 17 peer group meetings. Do you guys remember this? Maybe, maybe not. All right, here we go. Use small plates, right?
He talked about that in the Parkinsons Law also.
Correct. So this is going to get us first introduced to the concept through the food. So regarding food, the thought process is if you use a smaller plate, you'll have a smaller meal, right? That's the idea. The bigger the plate, the bigger the meal. He actually used an example of plate size and how plate size has changed over the last few decades. And just people use bigger plates, and so they eat more food than they did back in the old days. So that's number one. Number 2 is serve sequentially. Now, what that means is, put the good stuff on first, or the healthy stuff, right? So I went to my daughter's orientation at Boston University, and it was very interesting because the nutritionist came in and said, this is what we just shared with your new incoming students, because they talk about like the freshman 10 or whatever the heck it was, freshman 20. And they said, we try to get them to make half their plate vegetables and salads before, as they go through the line and get their food. And so she did a great job of explaining it from that perspective of, if the space is not there, then you're not going to load up on the bad stuff, right? So if you can start with the good stuff, and on this plate here, you can kind of see there's plenty of good stuff. The next one is remove temptation, which we all get that one, right? So if we can remove the temptation, I've had a massive battle with my wife over the last 2 decades about, please don't buy those foods. Please don't have them sitting around. And she, finally, I think she's cracked, but we used to have Oreo cookies laying around all the time. Certainly, I could go on forever. She liked little Entenmann cakes and things, all the bad packaged stuff, it's like, oh, please don't do that to me, because I could not handle it. So next is enforcing a rhythm. So this is the same idea of, if you're rhythmic in your eating, it will probably help you to metabolize and burn the calories better. Now, there's been arguments recently about doing it opposite that. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty on it, but I do believe that, that was part of the process, was to say, I'm going to do this consistently the same way, and that's going to enforce the good habits, right? Because good habits is what we're talking about. So now let's look at the principles of Profit First as explained in chapter 2. The first one is this Parkinson's Law, which I love it. He did a great job in his webinar last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess now. Rachel, did you see his webinar at all, or Michael Michalowicz? I think we can push her a link. Oh, you're still on mute, Charlie.
Sorry, my space bar unmute wasn't working. It's worth an hour. I'll send you the email that it's in, Rachel, because it's good.
Yeah,
And it gives you
Good,
kind of a
thank you.
glimpse of him also.
and you get to see him, and he's like squeezing the tube of toothpaste, you know, explaining it. But obviously we know that we push the toothpaste out from the bottom, and it gets to the end, and you're like, I always found like you're gonna find a way, right? So the last 5 days of a tube of toothpaste, you're probably using a significantly less quantity of toothpaste than you were on the first 5 days, right? So I think that's a big one. When you have less toothpaste, you're going to be frugal with it. When you have less money available to spend, you start to become frugal with it, right? That's the idea. The second thing you get out of this one piece is you become innovative, right? So if you have less money and you have a scarcity mentality, you start to think of things more innovatively. So it could be done in a rental operation or not even any small business. There's ways to do that. And it takes energy, takes a lot of time and focus, but certainly you benefit more at the end of the day because you have profit first and it ends up in your pocket. So the second,
He did a great job on his presentation. And he really, at the macro level, he made it just so very simple and so very basic that it was, it was almost like the light went off and it was like, duh, why haven't we operated that way? So he did a great job.
It's really insane if you think about it. Like, obviously he's proud of this particular analogy because it nails it, right? And if you're going to say one thing, if you have 1 minute to talk about profit first, it would be to talk about the tube of toothpaste, right?
Yep.
So there's really 4 principles, and the second one is the primacy effect, which almost is as good, which says why the first part of profit first matters. Okay, so what does that mean? It's the first thing that really tips that's where your mind focuses. So profit first. So they use this example: evil, hate, anger, joy, care, love. And then they put another one up, and it's very similar: love, care, joy, anger, hate. So which one is the saint? Which one is the sinner? Right? So you're looking at these words, and if people sometimes say, well, the first one, because the first 2 words are evil and hate. The second one, the first 2 words are love and care, but they're the same words, right? It's the same words, different order. But that's the power of the primacy effect, is whatever the first thing is, that seems to be your focus. So all we're asking is that you start to make profit first and not have it be about revenue per se. The third one is to remove the temptation. So what that means is if you take your profit first, we're suggesting you put it away, right? To put it away, put it somewhere else. Has anybody ever done that before? Save for a rainy day, vacation fund? Michelle, did you ever?
Yeah. In fact, from my paycheck, I automatically have a set amount going into savings and I never see that.
Nice.
Good
Very
for
cool.
you.
Only thing I can think of for me is 401k. I don't know. That sort of counts.
Yeah.
Get that.
I'm that way with Nikki's 401k. Like, it's all set up through State Farm and it's been coming out forever. And every once in a while you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that was sitting there.
Yeah, it's shocking how many working people do not invest money. So the first step is you'll invest if it's tax-free investment, right? So we'll take that money and we'll say, oh, we can avoid taxes. And in fact, maybe we're using our federal tax money if we're pulling it, right? So depending on what your tax burden looks like. So that's number one. But if we said number 2 is, hey, you know what? You should really put some money aside and invest it. A lot of us don't even think about it, right? We live paycheck to paycheck, and we're basically, at most, maybe we're saving for the Disney trip that takes place in 2 years. or something like that, but it's very rare that we can get stuff out of our site. Does anybody else have any examples of saving for a rainy day or anything like that? If not, we can move. So enforcing a rhythm. So this one was interesting. So he's starting, and we'll see this in chapter 5, 6, whatever. We'll start to see that you enforce a rhythm to this behavior, because initially when I saw this whole profit first thing, I'm like, how the heck am I going to maintain this? Like, how's this going to work? Well, it's these baby rhythm steps. So in this case, they give an example of waves rolling onto the beach, big wave, little wave, big wave, little wave, that kind of thing. It's the same thing with our cash. Like we can start to figure out the rhythm of our cash. And a great example is at peer groups. We collect the bulk of our money in January because a number of people want to pay their peer group fees for the year. So we capture it at the beginning of the year, and now we're like living with this money that covers our costs throughout the year. We do notice that some people do pay quarterly. So we know that it's going to be dry on cash February, March, and then April, we get another boost, right? Now, this all times with cash in our business needed to cover expenses for 17 groups meeting, which is a lot of steak and a lot of potatoes. So we have to make sure we have balances available to cover that cost, obviously in the form of a credit card. So that's another piece that happens. So rhythm is important. So first question to the group on a macro level is, can be confusing, because the first thing I said to myself was, well, I don't want to set aside my money in the buckets because I want to use my money to grow the business. So we have a tendency to think of growing the business as taking money. So how do you do this? So this is a question for the group. If I set aside my profits, how do I grow?
Well, but he never said that if you set aside your profits, you can't invest them back into the company.
He didn't say that yet, but he will.
Okay.
So talk to your brother.
Right. Where's he on this webinar?
But exactly. I begged him to come on. But so yeah, so let's take that one off the table. That's a good one, Charlie. And frankly, that's my answer. But we can't use that answer. So if I set aside
the other one
my
would be leverage, Dan.
What's that?
It would be leverage. You'd call debt.
Well, yes and no, but I think he wants us to stress this point of, if we're reversing the calculation and we're saying sales minus profits equals expense, he claims that we should be able to see our growth continue at whatever clip we want it to be, because it's not necessarily directly related to investing what we don't have. It can be done with our own expense structure, right? So, and the way I explain this, we were in a meeting and the event rental guys, we're doing 3 million. And then when COVID hit, they dropped down to 1.5 million. So they go to half the size, or even 1 million, some of them. So the question was like, well, how, when you owned a business that was doing 1 million, 1.5 million, how did you grow that business, right? So it wasn't strictly just leverage. It was this idea that you could organically grow. You didn't necessarily need to get a loan. You would essentially focus on how to be innovative and creative with your business to grow the profits. It's a little bit of Charlie Hustle talk, but it seems like that's where he's going. Now we'll get to the end of the book and we'll see how he feels about leverage even deeper, because this is the first question in the book that's kind of like trying to placate the naysayers that are saying, well, we're just going to take on more debt, so we want to watch against that. All right. So seeing these principles of, the how to eat right, put them in action into the business. So using small plates, he sees that as take the money in and put it on the serving tray. I don't know if you remember this. telling you, I read the book twice. I didn't remember any of this stuff until I did the PowerPoint. But you bring it in and you put it on the serving tray. And and the reason why is he says you take this money in and you say, this is profit, this is owner's comp, this is tax, and this is operating expense, or OPEX, as he likes to use it throughout the book. So I love this. So for some reason, I missed this the first 2 times I read the book. It totally makes sense to me. So if I have $100,000 in revenue, there's no question I should be able to allocate like this. And if I can't, bingo, that means I've got to start doing this, right? So I love that. That's step 1. Very easy to do. And I'll give you a tool to do that in a second. The second one was also equally disturbing, and that was don't pay the bills first, right? So, money comes in, pay the bills. What's our payables look like? We have payroll. We have these bills we have to pay. And how are we paying them? Is there a better way to pay them? Do we need to pay them? If we treat cash as the gold it's supposed to be, it starts to change our behavior around it. One of the things we do in peer groups is we actually calculate how fast everybody collects money and how fast people pay money. And so we look to evaluate bookkeepers and controllers and CFOs and say, hey, how are you managing that? Because we actually have some members who pay faster than they collect, especially if you're in Southern California. So it becomes very difficult when you're the bank, right, to implement a profit first. So that was number 2. Number 3 was remove temptation. And this is the concept that does bother some people, is you physically have to move the accounts out of reach. So what does that mean? So we have Wells Fargo accounts and their operating accounts, but yet we also have a bank called Ambassador. Or not Ambassador, Embassy. See, that's how frequently I use that with my profit. Can't remember the name of the bank. It's called Embassy. And we, use that to push profit. I'm not doing it as much as I should. But is anybody here have a second account set up, or are you strictly just operating out of one fund?
So after the webinar, I immediately started implementing a couple of these principles, and it actually helped take a lot of these pressures off of myself. So for example, when I moved the money out of the account, I'm like, well, we don't have that. So the gal who was taking care of the books is like, oh, okay, well then I guess I'll just start prioritizing how I pay the bills. And I'm like, that's what I've been trying to, that's what I've been trying to.
That's quick buy-in right there. Take that all day long.
And now we're actually having discussions about, as I mentioned initially, one of my big problems was my dad had always said, you take care of your employees. So that means that no matter what, I'm paying their paychecks and everything, but I now want to have them look at our revenue and say, hey, this has a lot to do with your paycheck. This has a lot to do with what you have. And when you don't see the big cash in the bank, then it's easier to have that discussion with them, because I think they just figured, Michelle's just gonna take care of everything. Right? I don't have any role in this at all. And now I can see that I can teach them how to take more ownership. And then again, it kind of goes into EOS and that book Clockwork. I can see it all kind of working together. So I'm hoping to have that formalized more in my mind.
So Clockwork might make it onto our book list at some point, right? So
I think it's worth a read, Dan.
Yeah, we'll check it out. It's going to be good. Excellent. Okay, so removing the temptation, got that. Now
So
we're
Michelle,
back
that second account that you set up, is it in a different bank that you don't have access to unless you physically go there?
So it has always been in a different account, and it had always been my desire not to touch it, but it just always got touched because they could see it. So now I'm cutting off the ability for my admin to be able to see that we have any money in another account. So that will be one that I just kind of monitor on the side.
So you've got it, but she doesn't.
Yes, exactly.
Nice.
Because I didn't realize how hard it is to teach people these principles. Again, I do the same thing for my personal finances. I never thought about doing them for business. I always thought it was different. And I'm
Yeah.
realizing now that it's not so different to tell your money what to do, where to go, rather than it dictating you.
That's excellent. Good points. Well, we appreciate that. I would say I don't even do that in my personal life. So that would be a good place to start.
All
right?
my accounts are on one bank and they all pop up on the same mobile app.
Yeah. Crazy.
Mhm.
Well, the last one is to enforce the rhythm. And this is the one that I probably am most looking forward to, because I get this hard decision to move money over and just do it. But then how do I maintain that discipline in terms of viewing it, discussing it, understanding, having conversations? When I wanted to start to get a little bit more plant-based diet, I had to tell my wife 6 times, because she was not going to believe me at first. And, until she got worn out. It's the same thing with me and employees. And as Michelle stated, with employees, I have an employee that loves to spend money. So, it's about, getting that rhythm down that says, we're going to review this and it's going to be part of our process. So we've grown our revenue 35% each year in the last 2 years. That's all anybody ever discusses. Nobody discusses the fact that we still don't make profit, right? Or whatever, we're breaking
Or what your
even.
cash flow is.
Exactly. So we need to focus on controlling the expense side. So this says allocate. And so allocating the money is number one, and then payables twice a month. So being able to, allocate and payables twice a month. So doing that process twice a month, build it in. And at the end, and I remember in Tony Peterson, Charlie's brother's podcast, he expressed that, before you know it, you turn around and you're 4 months in and it's working. And you're like, whoa, this actually works. But it's doing that next step, right? So that's that. So now we're in chapter 3.
You got
and
10 minutes.
We still have 10 minutes. Oh gosh. All right. These chapters, actually, chapter 3 and 4 were light. Just a quick review of the book. The first 2 chapters had all the meat. Next 2 chapters had some good stuff. So setting up profit first for your business is actually now the tactical. Bank balance accounting is discussed, and what does that mean versus not bank balance accounting? We have a tendency in peer groups to say bank balance accounting is bad. You should not be looking at what's in one pocket and, then pay with what comes out of the other pocket, whatever. We're saying you should be, managing your balance sheet more and look at leverage and all those things. But bank balance accounting is what is recommended for the purposes of profit first. If you haven't collected it, you didn't earn it. If you haven't paid it, it's still yours, right? So it's this idea of cash-based accounting. 5 foundational accounts. We talked about those just a minute ago. We're going to get into that. And then there's 2 no temptation accounts, which I think are fascinating. That's even deeper dive into accounts that are further away, that are basically hold monies where you literally it's a last stand. You would never go get that money unless you had to. And last is picking the bank. So the first one, taking action, get your business profit ready. Step 1, you just open up the 5 accounts. Now you heard Michelle took the first step, and Michael Michalowicz expressed that in his webinar, right? At least do the first step. Mm-hmm. So we have 1 step done in peer groups as well. My pledge to you is I will have the 5 accounts opened by the next book club, and let you know how that's going. I'm trying to retro back because we've only a third of the way into the year. I'm going to try to retro back and see if I can do that. It's all based on what you sold and collected. So going backwards shouldn't be too hard. So the 5 accounts are the 5 accounts. These are the 2 additional accounts, profit hold and tax hold. I do know that, one of our members, Tony, does have these in place. And there's actually deeper dives, and he has some other in place that are interesting. The last step is one that I guess I'd take him at his word, is to not enable convenience options. It sounds like Charlie was ready to do it in a heartbeat. That's the last thing I wanted to do was to have.
Oh, I wasn't. He was.
Okay. I will say that.
But that was one of the principles of the book, is that stuff you don't have easy transfer between the accounts.
And I'm just sharing that you said it today in the webinar, like very easily. And I'm like, because you said, well, Michelle, do you still have access to that account? That's annoying, but I agree with you. I think I'm going to do that. I mean, Embassy is a good example. Embassy doesn't commingle. See, the problem is it's easy to set up the commingling if you want to. So you have to like make sure you don't do it. And that's what his point was here with step number 3.
But
okay.
at the same time, like the other side of that is, if you don't have access to that, does it make it harder to put the money in there in the first place?
True.
It does if you set it up right. I
Yeah.
feel, and that I think that's one thing I'm running into is the banks won't allow zero balancing out. So for that initial account that Mike proposes, I can't find a bank that'll do that for me without significant fees. And I had to just manage and adjust accordingly. And that's why I still have access to the accounts, even though I know I'm not supposed to. But it was because of that, because I have to make sure that certain things are correct in the accounts. Once there's enough money in it, I won't have to look at it. I think and at that point, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And I'm hoping, so we do have the list of the 15 people who signed up. So we're going to keep in touch also with them via email and see if we can get everybody to the same point for chapter 5. Chapter 4 ends with, chapter 4 is actually, if you read the book, chapter 4 is literally just the assessment. So they give you this assessment. Here's the link here. This just gives you a picture of the steps in it. I printed it out. You can't see it because I'm on this weird thing, but I will click through and let you see this. So can you still see my computer? Is it showing a Google Drive? Or no?
It's still the same slide.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop share. I'm gonna share screen again real quick. Okay, so everyone on this call will get so inside of our PEG book club, we're going to start filling this up. These are different book summaries, and we have all sorts of interesting cheat sheet summaries on books and different diagrams that you can, visual cues to follow a book. Here's the Profit First book folder. You will get all these PowerPoints in here, and then any Profit First tools that we get from Profit First will be in here. So we'll give you the link, but it's on this PowerPoint. So I can send you the PowerPoint too, if that's easier. I'm assuming, Michelle, you already did this?
Yes, very eye-opening.
Yeah, so this really is great because it's essentially giving you a cue. So let's say that I'm a $1 million operator to 5 million. It's saying your real revenue is 100%. And that's just a cue to say, okay, what's fair when you compare all the other ones in the country, which I try to do. They say, take the money in on the plate, put 10% of it into profit, 10% into owner's pay, 15% into taxes, and that should leave you 65% for operating expense. So if you have $1 million in the course of the year, do not spend more than 650,000, right? It's the idea, because all these buckets should be full of money, right? That's the idea. So you're taking your actual data, and it's interesting, they have you put your material and subcontractors, but not your personnel, because they see all personnel as just operating expense. That's fair for rental. I think we're okay, because we know that as rental grows, you need more people, but we don't even necessarily look at it that way with our composite books yet. So because of that, I think this is probably, and I'll have to see if Tony changed his at all to deal with this, but you'll put your real numbers in here, and then you allocate your percent, and then that gives you the dollar amount. And then the difference between what you actually did in these buckets and what dollars you're supposed to do, it creates the bleed, right? Is that right, Michelle? And then the
Close to. I still have a lot of questions. It's not as easy as it looks, I think, to set it up the first time.
yeah.
But it's very eye-opening still, even though I know I filled it out incorrectly.
Well, we're going to all
You
go
gotta
through the
fill it out
process.
in pencil
Yeah,
the
fill it out
first
in
time.
pencil. But I will say, like, by all means, contact us. I think, Michelle, we're getting together next week, right? For Zoom. But we can go over that at that time, and certainly anybody else who wants to go over it. I'm going to make sure that mine's done by that time as well, so we can kind of share and see where things are at. But it's a neat little first step. And again, as you get into the next chapters, you will see that he takes it up a notch. And so that's a matter of whether you, can you guys see that? Oh, no, wait, hold on a second.
No, we're back.
Sorry. Let's see. All right, you can see that, right? Back to Frankenstein. Can you guys see Frankenstein? Yeah. All right, so that's that. So we're done. We had an hour. Any questions on the first? I think it's third? We finished a third of the book. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Now, so we do have some people who are getting this who are not in, so some people registered, they'll be getting this, but they won't necessarily be connected into peer groups. By all means, take a moment, write down these email addresses or one of them and send us your contact information, and we'll be glad to get you anything here that we haven't been able to get you. But this is going up on YouTube, so that means everybody who registered will be seeing it on YouTube, even though we won't know who 5 of you are, 6 of you. I forget how many. But anything else for the group? Charlie, anything to add? Terry?
Nope, good job.
All right. Well, Michelle and Rachel, thank you so much for coming, and Beth, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Do it all again.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you.
All right. Take care, guys.
Good. Good to see you, Michelle.